When the Galactic Empire first saw our primitive weapons, they laughed at the human military, underestimating what brutal savagery mankind could unleash until the alien scum witnessed firsthand the bloodthirsty war beasts we had created, and those smug grins turned to shrieks of horror and desperate pleas for mercy. "I still don't understand why those idiot apes are even allowed at the summit," Creel grumbled, his eye stalks twitching in annoyance as the shuttle sped through hyperspace. "What could humans possibly contribute? Their soldiers fight with chemically propelled projectiles. They've barely achieved FTL travel, and they still kill each other over lines drawn on maps." Jackson sighed. "You would be wise not to underestimate them, young one. I made that mistake decades ago, and it nearly cost me everything." Creel twisted to face his elder. "What are you talking about?" "Back when humanity first petitioned to join the Galactic Empire, many races dismissed them as primitive savages. I was part of the envoy sent to assess Earth's readiness for integration. Their representative, a hardened warrior named Jerry Morris, gave us a tour of one of their military installations." Jackson's voice dropped low. "He showed us advanced energy weapons, cloaking tech, even cybernetic enhancements. But what truly unnerved me was the massive, fortified enclosure on the base's edge. When I asked about it, Morris just smiled and said, 'That's where we keep the Warbeasts.' No further explanation." Creel leaned forward, intrigued. "Warbeasts? What manner of creatures were they?" "I didn't find out, but the glint in that human's eye when he said it chilled me to my core. Humanity is something feral and ancient that lurks behind this facade of civilization, and if pushed, I fear what they might unleash." The ominous words hung in the air as the shuttle hurtled onward, carrying them towards a future forever altered by humanity's presence on the galactic stage. As the envoy's tour of Earth facilities continued, Jackson found himself sitting in on meetings with high-ranking human military leaders. In one such briefing, a grizzled human general was discussing recent combat operations on various colony worlds. "I have to say our warbeasts have been incredibly effective in turning the tide of battle," the general said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Those creatures are damn near unstoppable." Jackson's ears perked up at the mention of warbeasts. Unable to contain his curiosity, he leaned forward. "Pardon me, General, but could you elaborate on these warbeasts? What exactly are they?" The general chuckled. "I suppose it's not common knowledge among other species. You see, we humans have a long history of domesticating and training animals for various purposes, including warfare. Our warbeasts are the pinnacle of that tradition." "What kinds of animals are they?" Jackson asked, intrigued. "We've genetically enhanced and cybernetically augmented a variety of species," the general explained. "Dogs, big cats, bears, elephants, you name it. We've made them stronger, faster, and more resilient than their natural counterparts, and their loyalty to their human handlers is unmatched." "Fascinating," Jackson murmured. "And they've proven effective in combat?" "Absolutely," the general said. "Just last month we had a small unit of soldiers deployed on a distant planet, tasked with defending a strategic outpost. They were accompanied by a pack of warbeasts, a mix of augmented wolves and tigers. When a much larger force of hostile aliens launched an attack, those beasts fearlessly charged into the fray." The general leaned back in his chair, a grin spreading across his face. "They tore through the enemy lines like they were made of paper. The aliens were completely caught off guard. They had no idea how to deal with the warbeasts' speed, strength, and ferocity. In the end, our small unit successfully repelled the attack, thanks in large part to those magnificent creatures." Jackson listened intently, his initial skepticism gradually giving way to a growing sense of unease. The casual way the general spoke of these warbeasts, and the obvious pride he took in their capabilities, was deeply disconcerting. As the meeting concluded, and the envoy members filed out of the room, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that he had just glimpsed a darker, more primal side of humanity, one that he had grossly underestimated. The implications of an entire army of these genetically engineered, cybernetically enhanced warbeasts were staggering. Walking down the corridor, lost in thought, Jackson nearly collided with one of his fellow diplomats. The other Ithorian looked at him with concern. "Are you all right, Jackson? You seem shaken." I'm not sure," Jackson admitted. "I think we may have made a grave mistake in dismissing these humans as primitive savages. There's something far more dangerous lurking beneath the surface." "What do you mean?" his colleague asked, confusion etched across his features. "These warbeasts they spoke of," Jackson said, his voice low and urgent. "The way the General described them, the sheer power and brutality they possess, I fear we have only scratched the surface of what humanity is truly capable of." "Surely you're overreacting," the other diplomat said, trying to sound reassuring. "They're still a young species, technologically speaking. How much of a threat could they really pose?" Jackson shook his head. "That's just it. We've underestimated them at every turn. And now learning about these warbeasts, I can't help but wonder what other secrets they're hiding, what other weapons or technologies they might have developed that we know nothing about." "You think they could be a threat to the Galactic Empire?" his colleague asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "I don't know," Jackson admitted, "but I do know that we need to be very careful in our dealings with them moving forward. We cannot afford to make the same mistake twice." As the envoy's visit drew to a close, Jerry Morris approached Jackson with an intriguing offer. "Before you leave, I'd like to invite you and your colleagues to witness a live demonstration of our warbeasts' capabilities. I think it will give you a better understanding of their true potential." Jackson hesitated for a moment, his earlier unease still lingering, but curiosity got the better of him. He nodded, and the group followed Morris to a massive indoor training facility. Inside, a simulated battlefield had been set up, complete with obstacles, cover, and various terrains. Morris introduced the diplomats to Sergeant Hawkins, a grizzled, one-eyed soldier who commanded a unit of warbeasts. Hawkins had a no-nonsense demeanor and an air of quiet confidence about him. "Each of our warbeasts is paired with a specific handler," he explained. "They form an unbreakable bond of trust and loyalty." To demonstrate this, Hawkins issued a series of commands to his own warbeast, a massive cybernetically enhanced tiger named Raja. The tiger responded instantly, performing complex maneuvers and even allowing Hawkins to ride on its back. The ease with which the soldier and beast worked together was both impressive and unsettling. Next, Hawkins and his team engaged in a simulated combat scenario against a group of heavily armed combat drones. The humans and their warbeasts moved as one, the animals using their enhanced senses and agility to detect and neutralize threats, while their human partners provided cover fire and strategic direction. Jackson watched in awe as Raja leapt onto a drone, its augmented claws tearing through the machine's armored plating like it was made of paper. Another warbeast, a giant wolf with glowing cybernetic eyes, moved with blinding speed, dodging incoming fire and taking down drones with ruthless efficiency. The diplomats were stunned by the display of raw power and coordination. It was clear that these warbeasts were not mere animals, but highly trained, technologically enhanced weapons of war. The implications of such creatures being deployed on a large scale were both awe-inspiring and terrifying. As the demonstration concluded, Jackson found himself grappling with a mix of emotions. He was impressed by the warbeasts' capabilities and the skill of their human handlers, but he was also deeply troubled by the potential consequences of such power in the hands of a species that had already proven itself to be unpredictable and dangerous. He glanced at his fellow diplomats, seeing similar expressions of amazement and concern on their faces. It was clear that they all shared the same realization. Humanity was far more formidable than they had ever imagined, and the Galactic Empire would need to tread carefully in its dealings with this enigmatic species. Jackson turned to Morris, who had a satisfied smile on his face. "That was impressive," the diplomat said, choosing his words carefully. "But I have to ask, what safeguards do you have in place to ensure that these warbeasts are used responsibly? The power they possess is considerable." Morris chuckled, a glint in his eye. "Oh, don't worry about that. Our warbeasts are completely loyal to their handlers and to humanity as a whole. They would never turn on us. In fact, I'd say they're our greatest asset in ensuring our place in the galaxy. Jackson nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Morris's confidence was misplaced. As he and the other diplomats boarded their shuttle to leave Earth, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held for the Galactic Empire now that humanity had revealed its true potential. Creel's eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait a minute," he interjected, holding up a clawed hand. "Are you telling me these warbeasts were actually as effective as the humans claimed? That they could take on a technologically superior force like the Xerax and win?" Jackson nodded solemnly, his gaze distant as he recalled the events. "Indeed, young one. After I returned to Ethoria, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had underestimated the humans. I began to investigate their military capabilities more closely, using my sources within the Galactic Empire." He leaned forward, his voice low and serious. "What I discovered was alarming. The humans had been deploying their warbeasts in various conflicts across the galaxy, with devastating results." Creel listened intently, his skepticism slowly giving way to a growing sense of unease. "There was one incident in particular that stood out," Jackson continued. "A small human colony on a remote planet found itself under attack by the Xerax. You know of them, don't you? The insectoid race that has long been a thorn in the side of the Galactic Empire." Creel nodded, his mandibles twitching nervously. "Yes, I've heard of their advanced weaponry and their pheromone-based communication. They're not an enemy to be taken lightly." "Exactly," Jackson agreed. "The Xerax were confident in their ability to crush the human settlement quickly. They had superior numbers and technology on their side." He paused for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. But they were caught completely off guard when the humans unleashed a pack of heavily armored, genetically modified warwolves. Creel's eye stalks twitched in surprise. "Warwolves?" "Yes," Jackson confirmed. "These creatures were bred for speed, strength, and ferocity. They tore through the Xerax ranks, their armor proving largely impervious to the insectoid's advanced weaponry." He shook his head in amazement, but that wasn't even the most surprising part. The warwolves' presence somehow disrupted the Xerax's pheromone-based communication, throwing them into disarray. "Within hours, the Xerax forces were routed, and the human colony was saved," Jackson said, his voice heavy with the weight of the implications. News of the victory spread quickly, and the Galactic Empire was forced to reevaluate its assessment of human military prowess. The two Ithorians sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. The idea that a primitive species like humanity could possess such formidable weapons was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "I fear we have awoken a sleeping giant," Jackson murmured, his gaze fixed on the stars streaking past the shuttle's viewport. "And now that the humans have revealed their true potential, the balance of power in the galaxy may never be the same." Creel leaned forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Wait, so the humans' victory against the Xerax wasn't an isolated incident. They've taken on other advanced races and won." Jackson nodded, a rueful smile playing across his lips. "Indeed they have. In fact, there was another incident a few years later that solidified their reputation as a force to be reckoned with." The elder Ithorian settled back in his seat, his gaze growing distant as he recalled the events. The Galactic Empire had been locked in a prolonged conflict with the Cranocs, a warlike species known for their advanced energy weapons and their ability to manipulate gravity fields. Creel's mandibles twitched nervously. "I've heard of them. They're not an enemy to be taken lightly." "No, they're not," Jackson agreed. "In one particularly decisive battle, a fleet of Cranocs warships managed to corner a lone human battlecruiser in a dense asteroid field. The humans were outgunned and outnumbered. It seemed like their fate was sealed." "But let me guess," Creel interjected. "The humans had another trick up their sleeve." Jackson chuckled. "You could say that. Just as the Cranocs were preparing to deliver the final blow, the human ship released a swarm of small, unmanned drones. At first glance, they appeared to be nothing more than a desperate last-ditch effort." "What were they?" Creel asked, leaning in closer. "Each drone was no larger than a human hand," Jackson explained, and they began to weave their way through the asteroid field, emitting strange, high-frequency pulses. The Cranocs paid them little mind, focusing their attention on the crippled human ship. The elder Ithorian paused for a moment, letting the tension build. But then something incredible happened. The asteroids around the Cranocs fleet began to move, as if guided by an unseen force. Creel's eye stalks twitched in surprise. The drones. Exactly, Jackson confirmed. It quickly became apparent that these drones were no ordinary machines. They were a type of cybernetic hive mind, capable of manipulating the gravitational fields of the asteroids themselves. By the stars, Creel muttered, his voice filled with a mix of awe and fear. Within minutes, the Cranocs fleet was bombarded by a relentless barrage of rocks. Their ships were smashed and torn apart by the very environment they had sought to use as cover. And all the while, the human battlecruiser remained untouched, protected by the swarm of drones. Jackson shook his head, still marveling at the memory. When it was all over, the human crew emerged from the asteroid field unscathed. They hailed the drones as the newest addition to their arsenal of warbeasts, a testament to humanity's ingenuity and resourcefulness. Creel sat back in his seat, his mind reeling from the implications of Jackson's tale. "It seems we've underestimated the humans at every turn," he murmured, more to himself than to his companion. "Indeed we have," Jackson agreed, his voice heavy with the weight of his own realizations. "And I fear that our ignorance may come back to haunt us. The humans have proven time and again that they are not to be trifled with. Their warbeasts, whether living creatures or machines, are a force to be reckoned with." The two Ithorians lapsed into silence, each lost in their own thoughts as the shuttle continued its journey through the endless expanse of space. The future of the Galactic Empire, and the role that humanity would play in it, suddenly seemed far less certain than it had just a few short hours ago. As the gravity of the situation settled over them, Creel turned to Jackson once more, a new question burning in his mind. Jackson's eyes gleamed as he settled back into his seat, his mind drifting to another remarkable tale of humanity's prowess with warbeasts. Creel, now fully engrossed in the Elder's stories, leaned forward eagerly. "Tell me more, Jackson. Were there any other instances where the humans used these creatures to turn the tide of battle?" The elder Ithorian nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Indeed, there was one particularly noteworthy incident from the early days of humanity's involvement in galactic affairs." He paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts before continuing. A group of human explorers had stumbled upon a primitive, warlike race known as the Vorak. These beings, who had yet to develop space travel, were locked in a brutal, planet-wide conflict that had raged for generations. Creel's eye stalks twitched with interest, and the humans saw an opportunity. "So the humans deployed their troops to fight alongside the Vorak?" Creel asked, assuming the obvious course of action. Jackson chuckled softly. "No, young one. The humans had a far more ingenious plan in mind. Rather than sending in their own soldiers, they brought a team of highly trained xenobiologists and geneticists to the planet." Creel's brow furrowed in confusion. "Scientists? What good would they be in a war?" "These were no ordinary scientists," Jackson explained patiently. "They quickly set about studying the planet's native fauna, searching for creatures that could be adapted for use as warbeasts." Understanding dawned on Creel's face as he began to grasp the human strategy. They wanted to create new warbeasts from the local wildlife. Jackson nodded approvingly. Within months they had identified a species of large reptilian predators known as the Gorax. These creatures possessed a natural camouflage ability and a venomous bite, making them ideal candidates for adaptation. The Gorax were subjected to a rigorous program of genetic modification and cybernetic enhancement, the elder continued, his voice filled with a mix of awe and trepidation. The resulting warbeasts were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, massive, intelligent, and utterly loyal to their human masters. Creel's eyes widened as he tried to imagine the sheer power of these new creatures. And what happened when they were unleashed upon the battlefield? "The results were devastating," Jackson said grimly. The modified Gorax moved like ghosts through the dense jungles, striking with lightning speed and disappearing before the enemy could react. Their camouflage abilities rendered them nearly invisible, while their venomous bites left their victims writhing in agony. The younger Ithorian shuddered at the thought of facing such formidable adversaries. The Vorak must have been overwhelmed. Indeed they were, Jackson confirmed. Within weeks the Vorak's war machine had ground to a halt. Their armies were scattered, and their leaders were begging for mercy. The humans had won a stunning victory without firing a single shot. Creel sat back in his seat, marveling at the tale. It seems the humans' mastery over these warbeasts knows no bounds. Jackson nodded solemnly. Their ability to adapt and innovate is truly remarkable, but it also serves as a stark reminder of the potential danger they pose to the rest of the galaxy. As the two Ithorians sat in contemplative silence, the weight of Jackson's words hung heavy in the air. The humans, once dismissed as primitive and insignificant, had proven themselves to be a force to be reckoned with, a species whose ingenuity and resourcefulness knew no limits. Creel sat back in his seat, his eye stalks blinking slowly as he processed the incredible tales Jackson had shared. The sheer ingenuity and resourcefulness of the humans in their use of warbeasts were astounding. A thought occurred to him, and he turned to face his elder companion. Jackson, have any other races attempted to develop their own warbeasts in response to the human success? Creel asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Jackson chuckled, shaking his head in amusement. Oh, they've tried, young one. Several races have sought to replicate the humans' achievements, but none have come close to matching their skill and creativity. The elder Ithorian leaned forward, a mischievous glint in his eye. In fact, there was one particularly amusing incident involving the Zephyrians. You know of them, don't you? The race renowned for their advanced biotechnology. Creel nodded, his interest piqued. Yes, I've heard of their reputation. What happened? Well, Jackson began, the Zephyrians, in their infinite wisdom, decided to create their own warbeasts. They genetically engineered a species of giant flying insects, believing them to be the perfect aerial combat units. The younger Ithorian's eye stalks twitched in surprise. Giant flying insects, that sounds formidable. Oh, they certainly thought so, Jackson agreed, a smirk playing across his lips. However, when they deployed these creatures in battle against a human fleet, they quickly discovered a critical flaw in their design. Creel leaned in closer, eager to hear more. What was the flaw? It turned out that these insects were highly susceptible to certain frequencies of sound, Jackson revealed, his voice laced with mirth, frequencies that the human ships were all too happy to broadcast at high volumes. The elder Ithorian's shoulders shook with laughter as he recounted the scene. Within minutes of the battle's start, the Zephyrian warbeasts had become completely disoriented. They flew erratically, crashing into each other in a chaotic swarm. Creel's eyes widened, trying to imagine the spectacle, and the human fleet. They simply sat back and watched, Jackson said, a grin spreading across his face. Their crews were laughing at the sight of the once proud Zephyrian warriors frantically trying to regain control of their misbehaving creations. The younger Ithorian couldn't help but chuckle at the thought. I can only imagine the humiliation the Zephyrians must have felt. Indeed, Jackson agreed, nodding sagely. In the end, they were forced to retreat, their warbeasts proving to be more of a liability than an asset. As the laughter subsided, Jackson's expression grew more serious. That incident served as a powerful reminder to the rest of the galaxy that the humans' mastery of warbeast technology is not something to be trifled with. The younger Ithorian leaned back in his seat, his mind reeling from the implications of Jackson's words. It's incredible to think that the humans' warbeasts could be used for something other than destruction and conquest, Creel mused, his eye stalks blinking slowly. I never would have imagined them as tools for terraforming and colonization. Jackson nodded, a knowing smile playing across his lips. It's a testament to the humans' ingenuity and adaptability, he said, his voice tinged with a hint of admiration. They are not content to simply conquer and destroy. but rather seek to shape the galaxy to their will, even if it means taming the most inhospitable of worlds. The elder Ithorian paused for a moment, his gaze drifting to the stars streaking past the shuttle's viewport. "I recall a particularly fascinating case on a planet called Novus Prime," he began, his voice taking on a thoughtful tone. "It was a world that had long been considered uninhabitable, with a toxic atmosphere and a surface covered in dense, impenetrable jungles." Creel leaned forward, his interest piqued. "And the humans sought to colonize it?" "Indeed," Jackson confirmed. "They were drawn to the planet's rich mineral deposits, but the hostile environment and vicious native predators made it all but impossible for them to establish a foothold." The younger Ithorian's eye stalks twitched in confusion. "So how did they overcome such challenges?" "By turning to their Warbeast division," Jackson explained, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. "The humans sent a team of their top scientists and engineers to Novus Prime, along with a contingent of specially trained warbeasts, bred specifically for terraforming." Creel's eyes widened in surprise. "Terraforming warbeasts? I've never heard of such a thing." Jackson chuckled, shaking his head. "Neither had I until I saw them with my own eyes. These creatures were unlike anything I had ever encountered, massive, lumbering beasts with thick armored hides and powerful prehensile limbs." The elder Ithorian's voice dropped to a reverent whisper. But what truly set them apart was their ability to process and break down the planet's toxic atmosphere, converting it into breathable air. Creel sat back in his seat, his mind struggling to comprehend the sheer scope of such an undertaking. "And it worked?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Beyond anyone's wildest expectations," Jackson confirmed, a note of awe in his voice. Within months of the Warbeast's arrival, the skies above Novus Prime had begun to clear, and the once impenetrable jungles had started to recede. The younger Ithorian shook his head in amazement. "It's hard to believe that such a thing is even possible." "And yet, the proof is there for all to see," Jackson said, a hint of pride in his voice. "The colonists who had once struggled to survive on the planet's surface are now thriving, their settlements expanding rapidly across the newly habitable landscape." Creel fell silent for a moment, his mind grappling with the implications of such a feat. "It seems the humans' mastery of their warbeasts knows no bounds," he murmured, more to himself than to his companion. Jackson nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "The success of the Novus Prime mission has opened the galaxy's eyes to the true potential of the humans' warbeast technology," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of admiration and trepidation. "No longer are these creatures seen solely as instruments of war, but rather as tools for exploration, colonization, and even ecological restoration." The two Ithorians lapsed into silence, each lost in their own thoughts as the shuttle hurtled through the void of space. The humans, it seemed, were far more than the primitive savages they had once been dismissed as. They were a force to be reckoned with, a species whose ingenuity and resourcefulness knew no bounds. And as the galaxy watched, equal parts amazed and terrified, it became clear that the future of the Galactic Empire, and indeed the fate of the entire universe, would be forever shaped by the actions of these enigmatic beings and their incredible warbeasts. Creel leaned back in his seat, his eye stalks blinking slowly as he processed the incredible stories Jackson had shared about the humans' mastery of warbeast technology. He couldn't help but wonder if there were any other applications for these remarkable creatures beyond the battlefield. "Jackson," Creel began, his voice tinged with curiosity, "have the humans ever used their warbeasts for anything other than military purposes? It seems like such technology could have incredible potential in other fields." A grin spread across Jackson's face, and his eyes sparkled with excitement. "As a matter of fact, they have, young one. In fact, there's one particular example that comes to mind. The Galactic Scientific Expedition." Creel leaned forward, intrigued. "What was that?" "It was a joint venture between the humans and several other advanced races," Jackson explained, "aimed at exploring the farthest reaches of the known universe. The expedition had been in the planning stages for decades, and it required the construction of a massive self-sustaining ship, capable of housing thousands of scientists, researchers, and their families for years at a time. That must have been a monumental undertaking, Creel remarked, trying to imagine the scale of such a vessel. Indeed it was, Jackson agreed, and the humans who had been tasked with designing the ship's life support systems surprised everyone by proposing the use of warbeasts as an integral part of the vessel's ecosystem. Creel's eye stalks twitched in surprise. Warbeasts? On a scientific expedition? Jackson nodded, his grin widening. Yes, but these were unlike any warbeasts the galaxy had seen before. They were small, unassuming creatures, resembling a cross between a terrestrial mole and a sea sponge. The younger Ithorian tried to picture the odd-sounding creatures in his mind. What made them so special? What they lacked in size and strength, they more than made up for in their ability to recycle and purify the ship's air and water supply, Jackson explained. The humans had specifically engineered them for this purpose. How did they work? Creel asked, his curiosity growing by the moment. The warbeasts, which the humans dubbed eco-moles, were released into the ship's vast network of pipes and ducts. There they thrived on the vessel's waste products, breaking them down into clean, breathable air and potable water. Creel's eyes widened in amazement. That's incredible, but how did the other races react to the idea of using warbeasts in such a way? They were skeptical at first, Jackson admitted, but as the ship ventured deeper into uncharted space, the effectiveness of the eco-moles became impossible to deny. The vessel's life support systems, which had been designed to last for years, were now projected to function indefinitely, thanks in large part to the tireless work of the warbeasts. The elder Ithorian leaned back in his seat, a look of admiration on his face. The success of the eco-moles cemented the humans' reputation as the undisputed masters of war-beast technology. It sparked a new era of cooperation and collaboration between the races of the galaxy as they realized the incredible potential of these creatures beyond the battlefield. Creel sat in silence for a moment, his mind reeling with the implications of Jackson's words. The humans, it seemed, were not just masters of war, but also of life itself. Their ingenuity and resourcefulness knew no bounds, and the galaxy was only just beginning to understand the true depth of their capabilities. As the shuttle hurtled through the endless expanse of space, Creel couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder at the incredible stories Jackson had shared. The humans were truly a force to be reckoned with, and he had no doubt that their influence on the galaxy would only continue to grow in the years to come. Jackson, sensing the young Ithorian's amazement, leaned forward with a conspiratorial smile. You know, Creel, the story of the eco-moles is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the humans' achievements with warbeasts. Have you ever heard of the terraformers? Creel shook his head, his eye stalks quivering with anticipation. No, I haven't. What are they? Now that's a tale worth telling, Jackson said, his voice dropping to a whisper. It all started on a barren, lifeless world on the edge of the Orion Arm. As the shuttle hurtled through the void, the weight of Jackson's words hung heavy in the air. Creel, who had been enthralled by the elder Ithorian's tales of human ingenuity and the wonders of their war-beast technology, now sat in stunned silence, his mind reeling from the revelation of the neo-beasts and the devastation they had wrought. He turned to Jackson, his eye stalks quivering with a mix of fear and disbelief. How could the humans have let this happen? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. After all their achievements, all the good they had done with their warbeasts, how could they have been so reckless? Jackson sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the memories. It was a mistake, he said, his voice heavy with regret. A terrible, tragic mistake. In their quest for perfection, the humans had pushed too far, delved too deep into the mysteries of life itself. He shook his head, his gaze distant and haunted. They thought they could control the neo-beasts, harness their power for the greater good, but they were wrong. The creatures were too intelligent, too self-aware. They had their own desires, their own agendas. Creel leaned forward, his eyes wide with horror. What happened next, he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Jackson closed his eyes, the memories flooding back in a rush of pain and chaos. The neo-beasts turned on their creators, he said, his voice barely audible over the hum of the shuttle's engines. They lashed out with a fury and a power unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Entire planets were consumed in the blink of an eye, their populations wiped out in an instant. He paused, his breath catching in his throat. The humans fought back, of course. They unleashed their most powerful warbeasts, the ones they had kept hidden away for years, hoping never to have to use them. But even they were no match for the neo-beasts. Creel's mouth went dry, his heart pounding in his chest. "How did it end?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "In fire and blood," Jackson said, his voice a hoarse whisper. The humans emerged victorious, but at a terrible cost. Their civilization was in ruins, their people scattered to the winds, and the rest of the galaxy. We were left to pick up the pieces, to try and make sense of the madness. He turned to Creel, his eyes haunted and full of pain. "The neo-beasts were a reminder," he said, his voice barely audible over the hum of the shuttle's engines. "A reminder that even the most advanced and powerful technologies can have unintended consequences, and that those who wield them must do so with the utmost caution and responsibility." Creel nodded, the weight of Jackson's words settling over him like a heavy blanket. He had always been in awe of the humans and their warbeast technology, had always seen them as the shining beacon of progress and innovation in the galaxy. But now, he realized, that light had been tainted by the shadow of the neo-beasts and the devastation they had wrought. As the shuttle began its final approach to the summit station, Creel found himself lost in thought, pondering the lessons of Jackson's tale and the implications they held for the future of the galaxy. The humans had achieved incredible things with their warbeasts, it was true, but they had also unleashed forces beyond their control, forces that had nearly destroyed them and everything they had built. It was a sobering realization, one that left Creel feeling small and insignificant in the face of the vast, unknowable expanse of the universe. And as he watched the summit station grow larger in the viewport, he couldn't shake the feeling that the future of the galaxy and the role that humanity would play in it was far from certain. The shuttle shuddered as it passed through the station's atmospheric shield, the sudden change in pressure causing Creel's ears to pop. He barely noticed, his mind still reeling from the weight of Jackson's revelations. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.